Welcome everybody. So again, today's coffee break session number 3 is on organizing documentation to save time and money. My name is Sherry Barnett. I am your host today, and since I'm not operating slides, I'm going to ask Colin, who I will introduce in just a moment, to give us the second slide, if you would, with my face on it. At any rate, we'll get there in a second. So am the product marketing manager for our remote monitoring tools and for our regular tools, which include Take Control and MSPM and stuff like that. But I've been around here for a while, and I've been around the block shipping software for a very long time, and have been at SolarWinds for 2.5 years. So that's who I am. So let's get to a few items that I would just want you all to know on the webinar today. Everybody's on mute. If you have questions, and I hope you do, ask them as we go along and use the chat window. Let us know if you're having any AV issues. And of course, the session is being recorded, and we will send you the recording, a link to the recording after the webinar in the next few days. So what we're going to talk about today is Colin who I'll introduce in one sec, is going to kind of set the stage for where we are right now with documentation and what you guys are probably most concerned about there. What's the changing security landscape around documentation? Then he's got 3 quick tips to offer you about documentation and how to stay organized, how to standardize MSP and client documentation, how to eliminate wasted time. We all want to do that, and ensure ongoing management of documentation, which is really important, especially as employees may change and you get more clients and life evolves. So, and then we will hopefully have a little bit of time in our 30 minutes for some questions and answers. So please send your questions in, and we'll cover those before the end. So without further ado, our speaker today is Colin Knox. And Colin is the Director of Product Strategy, and he was the founder of Passportal, which is our password management tool, and has several other products involved in that suite. He's worked for 3 MSPs and then ultimately founded his own MSP, XCEL. He grew Excel staff to 22 members and $4 million in revenue in 5 years. He's that guy. He's amazing. And he founded Passportal in response to a need for an MSP-centric password management solution. So our password management solution is totally built for MSPs. And he was one and really understands the issues that you face. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about documentation. So, Colin, take it away,
Sounds
man.
good. Sounds good. Do you see the slides okay now? I tried to reshare the
Yes.
screen. Okay, perfect. I want to make sure we
It's
don't have any
great.
issues there. Thanks, Sherry, and thanks for kicking it off, and thanks to everybody for your time today. So, we'll kind of start jumping right in on things. This coffee break had an overwhelming response to it. Hundreds and hundreds of people registered for this one. So, really want to dive into the content, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A at the end. But at the very root of it, the challenge that we find is that so many MSPs are lacking standard practices when it comes to documentation. And as a result of that, your technicians are wasting a significant amount of time just looking for information, the information that they need in order to deliver effective IT support to your clients. And when we don't document it, when we don't have this written down, when we don't have it standardized and structured, it leaves the client data all in the hands or minds of only certain individuals in your organization. And it doesn't matter if that person's with your company anymore or not, because even if they're with your company, they could be busy, they could be offsite at another issue, they could be on vacation, they could be sick, or they could be on a call and otherwise unavailable to help another technician when they readily need this information. And so really to narrowing down on this challenge and understand where to start, understand what you need to do, it starts with a few of the information, or a few posed questions to yourselves, right? And that starts with, do you even know which information to capture? And that's kind of one of those daunting tasks when it comes to starting documentation is, where the heck do I start? What do I document first? How do I document it? How do I make sure I'm capturing the right information? Where do you start with that, and how do you standardize that capture of the knowledge and that information? And then further, how do you share it and put it in the hands of all the other people in your organization so that you can be as effective and as efficient as possible running your MSP and delivering IT services? And so we'll start this off with a little bit of a poll, if we can get Sherry or somebody to kick off the poll. But really, how much time do you estimate in your business that your workers and technicians spend daily trying to find information they need to do their jobs? We'll
Yep.
see what you guys think about that. Obviously, we have a statistic coming out of it, but we're going to try and true it up and see how close the attendance of this webinar are with the research results.
Yeah, where you guys benchmark against our research. So we'll give you guys some time here to respond, but right now we've got 65% of people saying that they spend 10 to 20% of their time looking for
Just looking for
documentation.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think all of us, I could certainly spend that amount of time just on my computer trying to remember where the heck
Yeah.
I put something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, with that, I mean, that's kind of true. You'll see some of the statistics as we go in here, but a lot of the research out there, and there's been a number of research institutes that have gone through and done this, is that employees are spending on average nearly 2 hours every day and over 9 hours per week just searching for and gathering information, just to understand what it is that they need to do their job, whether it's usernames and passwords to log into things, whether it's what a standard operating procedure or a policy is, or looking for historical information on a client or a product. It's all of this time that just goes to searching for and gathering information, which means out of a 40-hour work week, only 30 hours really are being used to do their jobs and being productive. And so it's a huge opportunity for capacity gain. The other interesting information that's coming out of some of this research is that often it's not just, you're not spending 2 hours every day doing a quick search, finding that information, consuming that information. It's actually taking on average 8 searches to find the right document and information. So you might do a quick search within your system, then you're maybe reaching out to and emailing a colleague or a couple other coworkers to find information, maybe phoning somebody, looking in a different system until you finally find it. And then a lot of times after you've spent that considerable amount of time, maybe even up to 25 minutes to find what you're looking for, then how do you know that that's the actual most up-to-date version of what you're looking for? So anyways, a lot of consequences with this, a lot of information that's broken up and going through. So let's jump into some of the tips. I think a lot of people understand and know that this is the situation that it is. So how can we help you guys? How can you really get started on standardizing your documentation practices? So the first thing is where do you start? Which parts of a client network and an IT system would you document first? And so a lot of what we look at is the speed to onboarding, the speed to getting this information put together. And so that really starts with what I like to call is like the nucleus of the documentation, really boils down to the assets, the devices and systems that you're managing. And so with the advent of your RMM solutions that are already monitoring all these assets, being able to integrate with those types of solutions so that without a bunch of data entry and work, you can pull all of these assets and devices into a documentation system. And then as you've got these assets, it's about connecting those assets at the most rudimentary level to the clients that they're managed or being deployed at. What locations maybe even of the client that they're deployed at, so that it's a geographic locator of understanding maybe even where these assets and devices that may be a root cause for something are located in proximity, and then the contacts that are connected to those devices. So that's really a great place to start. The next place is you start to look at all the cloud services and everything else that's going on in your client systems. You look at what you can document to mitigate some of the most popular and common outage scenarios that you would need to know. One of those being domain registrations, domain information, and SSL certifications. So documenting and bringing into a system all of the domains that your client uses, all of their aliases for their emails, SSL certificates, so that if there's an event of an expiration that comes up that maybe crept up on you, you can actually handle that in advance by properly monitoring and tracking that domain or SSL certificate. The other thing that we see as MSPs all the time is when, a web company comes in and, deploys a new website, or a marketing company for our clients, and they hijack the domain, and all of a sudden DNS is moved over and we've lost MX. So being able to track that domain, understand the version history of it, what the MX record was set to, and be able to go forward with that. Once you have all those assets and the contacts, locations, domains, and SSL certs documented, for me, the next thing is the passwords. I think a lot of these technicians that we have and that we employ are very smart people, and that's why we employ them. So as you bring these people on and you're trying to document things, the next thing is, it's great that they know what's out there at their clients, what devices there are, what domains, what SSL certificates, but then the next piece is, how do they gain access to it? And so being able to tie and bring all of your passwords and credentials into the system so that you can then relate those credentials to the assets that are needing to be managed, relate them to certain locations, relate them to certain domains for domain management and whatnot, and have that. Once you have those kind of core components or core items handled and documented, that's when you can really start getting into the meat of your documentation and configurations and whatnot. And so you can start to step into things like Active Directory documentation, or whatever directory service you are using for your clients, so that you understand how they're authenticated, how it manages their own access control, how they control that, who their users are, and everything else. As you have that, there's generally a nice tie-in from Active Directory or directory service into their emails. And the emails generally tie back to the domains that you've already entered. So you can document who's hosting, if it's a hosted email, how it's configured, what it connects to, what domain it's related to, relate it and link it to the credential that manages it. Next, you start to talk about some of the critical incidents that might come up, where urgency and efficiency is going to be of the utmost importance, and that comes to business continuity and disaster recovery. So documenting the backup for the client, documenting how the internet's connected and how the internet's configured, and then stepping into all of your applications and services that are running on that network and documenting those on a template-driven, standardized platform. Once you have this stuff all documented so that at the base root, your technicians have immediate access to the knowledge they're looking for, with a bird's eye view of how everything is interconnected and intermingled, and what depends on what and what relies on what, that's the point that now you have this knowledge contained. And the next part is documenting for how they can do their jobs. And that's where you really start to get into standard operating procedures and SOPs. And SOPs are a wonderful thing for any type of business in any industry, where you can really drive efficiency in your business. But again, a lot of people say, well, where do you start? How do you start documenting a standard operating procedure? What do you put into it? How can you do this? And so there's a few core steps that you can go through, right? One is, understanding what the end result is. What's the goal of the standard operating procedure? Because that can help you reverse engineer to make sure that you know exactly what the purpose of this individual SOP is. Beyond that, it's taking your format of it, right? And a lot of people are very step-by-step driven people. So building a step-driven document as an SOP that walks it through. Now, you could create a very massive, very broad standard operating procedure with a ton of steps, but really, if you want to create things that are going to be followed, that are going to be simplistic, that make sense and easy to find and easily structured, you don't want these massive SOPs. So the most important part of it, to me, is defining a scope to that SOP, getting down to the most basic version, almost the minimum viable version of your procedure, and defining that scope. What is and what is not included in this, and understanding that you can always relate other SOPs together in a sequence if needed, but taking smaller bites is going to be what drives to people to not be overwhelmed when going in to take a task, or not skipping steps, or even ignoring the standard operating procedure that's been created. And as you create these things, the next and most important part is understanding that SOPs are living. There's always changes happening out at your client networks. There's always changes that happen procedurally. There's mistakes as as MSPs, and I was one. We make mistakes all the time, and we learn from those mistakes. So then it's the constant updating and revising of these SOPs. Once you have that first SOP written, though, you need to test it, and you need to walk it through literally and exactly as written, so that you can make sure you find if there's missteps or steps that are out of order. There was a wicked video that was out on LinkedIn and Facebook just in the last week, where this guy had his children write step by step, essentially an SOP for creating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then he followed them step by step to show all of the misses, all of the problems, all the misdefinition and clarity of certain points. And that's what's really important when we're going into driving our SOPs, is the clarity and the definition of exactly what it is that somebody's to do, how they're to do it, and in what order they're to do it.
So really good stuff. Colin, really quickly, one of our folks asked the question, but how do you find time to do this when you are, like, say you're the only IT guy in a company?
Yeah.
How did you find time?
So I think in some cases, I mean, it's one of these things that is so critical to the success of your business. It's really part of setting the foundation to help you scale for growth and profitable growth. And so in some cases, the hard answer is you need to find time. Just like if you want to get in shape, you need to find time to go to the gym. You need to find time to do the meal prepping, right? It's kind of the same thing, is finding time. Depending on the size of your organization, if you have a few people, you do have the ability to make somebody a champion or rotate a champion of documentation through your organization as you're doing it. A lot of it can be a gradual process as well, that you kind of set milestones for yourselves of, okay, by the end of this week, we're going to have all of our assets in the system and have them connected to all of the contacts, all the locations, and have that done. By the end of next week, we're going to have all of the domains and SSL certificates imported into the system. By the end of the next week, we're going to have migrated our credentials in. And then you can just do it bit by bit by bit, and kind of take it. I mean, some people will approach it, they'll do it one client and document an entire client at once, and then move on to the next client. Or you can do it that every client gets documented these components as you go. But it does really come down to a commitment of that time and effort to put into it, to really get it going. And we've got some other tips later on in the webinar here to talk about how you can drive that culture of documentation and how you can help stay on top of it between yourselves and your teams.
That's great. Let's get to those. Yay.
Yeah, so
Tip number
the
2.
next quick tip is eliminating the wasted time. So how can you centralize your documentation storage? What kinds of documents or files should you be storing? And how do you make sure that they're easily accessible? I think when you look at it, it's centralizing is easy. It doesn't matter what system you're using. There's so many different options out there. There's, file sync and share solutions. There's other cloud storage solutions. There's, regular file systems. There's tools like SharePoint, OneNote. There's a million ways that you can actually document and centralize this stuff. The next thing comes down to, what types of documents or SOPs or files should you have, right? And that's where you start to break down is what's of most critical importance to you. Is it your internal policy-driven procedures, your escalations, your paths between departments? If you've got, from start to finish on a quoting, procurement, shipping, receiving, configuration, implementation type thing. Do you have client specific software installations, new user setups, stuff like that? So you kind of break your SOPs into your internal ones for procedural and process driven things, for how you operate your business. And then you have your client facing ones that are the ones of how you do specific tasks for each client and how you accomplish certain requirements out there. And then the next thing is there's files that are generally associated with documentation. And so question we get a lot of times is, what types of files should I be connecting to it? And I think this is where it starts to come to how you can centralize everything together, from when you have your documentation tied to credentials and credential management and tied to files, is where you can really start to see a whole lot more efficiency gains. That if I can capture and gather knowledge about what I need to configure, how I need to configure it, and how to gain access to it, the next piece is, what do I need peripherally with that, right? Is there installer files for that line of business application or the client or the VPN or whatever else it is? Is there a license or a key file that I need to, configure and connect to and browse to in order to have that application or software running? Is there firmware and firmware releases? So if we're an MSP and we've standardized across the board of all of our clients on one firewall make and manufacturer, do I have and correspond and tie the most up-to-date versions of the firmware to those firewalls? Do I have the backup exports of those configurations as well, tied and connected to those firewalls? Anything that you can do that reduces the time of somebody searching for information or searching for something that they need to do their job is all about just pulling it together. The next thing is bringing in diagrams and tying diagrams to a local area network or to a WAN, internet WAN document, and kind of bringing all that up. So it kind of comes down to a whole bunch of different types of documents, but recognizing and kind of taking that 30,000 foot view of when a technician is doing a job, what all are they working in, what all are they looking for, and where are they looking for it? And then tying those things together to relate to each other, so that in one system, in one window, in one tool, they have the ability to quickly jump to those different things.
Cool. Let's get to our next poll.
All right, you bet. So, thinking in your business and what types of things your technicians or even you are looking for and trying to access on a regular basis, maybe let us know what you're seeing is the most important and kind of which ones are the ones that you are regularly and your team is regularly needing to access.
And I'm seeing, wow, 80% needing configurations, 60% needing product and company documentation. Keep letting you guys fill this in. There we go. You can see. Half of you need SOPs for sure. Yeah, so we're kind of settling at about 82% configuration, 60% product documentation, and
Nice.
46% SOPs. Yeah.
Yeah, and SOP is just one of those big things that really takes a lot of focus. Being mindful of time, we'll jump into the third tip is how do you ensure the ongoing management of your documentation? So one of the things that we always did, and something that we recommend to a lot of MSPs, is that make updating documentation a step, and sometimes the final step, in every SOP. Right? If you're creating a new user and then you got to take it back that there's something that was missed, something that went wrong, make sure that there's a thing to update the SOP. If it's updating the firmware, doing a backup, making a configuration change on a firewall, make sure that part of that SOP is update documentation after with configuration changes. Upload newest version of firmware that was installed. Load and upload the most recent export of current configuration into the documentation system, and making sure that the documentation is accessible for the entire team on an ongoing basis. Because even as people are being onboarded as new technicians coming in, this is how you're going to onboard people quicker. And as they're consuming and digesting all of this knowledge and information, they may actually point out a lot of areas that maybe they feel like, why do we do it this way? Have you considered this? Have you, oh, I really expected, or I think we're missing something here, and giving them the opportunity to be able to participate in that. Another easy way to ensure ongoing management, gamification. People love winning prizes. And when you're able to use a solution and put things in and be able to track who is inputting information, who's viewing information, even like giving prizes to people or gamifying things as a leader, that allows people to understand that, hey, I'm actually getting kudos for following the SOPs and viewing the SOPs. I'm getting kudos for logging in and tracing information from client networks into the system, and just making it a consistent focus as part of your company of whenever they make a change, whenever they do something, whenever they look something up, or if they read something and go out and look at a client network and realize that there's actually a difference, update that documentation and provide rewards around that. One of the most beautiful benefits that you get out of having continuously updating and evolved documentation is a historical timeline of change events for your clients, right? So many times we try to look back through tickets. We try to find out, when did this change on the firewall? When did this record change on the DNS? When did this happen? When was something done? When was a change made? The beauty is being able to go back into your documentation system and see that, Greg made a change on December 19th to the firewall, and then you can actually revert to that version of back then and see what the previous configuration was and what the differences were. And then you have an idea of, this is where that change happened, and being able to timeline track down exactly what happened based on configurations, and not searching through a massive pool of tickets with no standardization to them. So those are some of the tips there. As you already know, Passportal and SolarWinds Passportal offers documentation and documentation management. And for us, it's all about providing that one pane of glass that provides your technicians the safest and most rapid access to all the privileged information and knowledge that they need to effectively support clients. We're integrated across a wealth of RMM systems, PSA systems. On the password management side, we take automation to the next level with automated password rotations across Active Directory, Office 365, and Azure AD. And it's all about putting the information and knowledge in the hands of your techs to do the jobs that you've hired them to do. As a wrap
So
up, just before we get to Q&A, I'll let Sherry, let you step
yeah,
in
no,
here.
I'm just, if you guys are interested, if you want to learn more, you knew a commercial was coming, but this, again, built for MSPs. So if you want to learn more, just let us know and we'll be happy to follow up with you. But there was one question that that somebody had that I thought was interesting. Are you able to set a due date or expiration date on documentation? Is that something that we support, and how have you used that in the past?
Yeah, so interestingly, with any document or with any template that we have, you can create a field for expiration date. There's a whole lot of things that you can actually do, and something really cool that's coming out soon is the ability to be alerted on anything to do with any of the information in Passportal and Documentation Manager. So if you want to set an alert that you get notified when something reaches a certain age, you can do that and have a posting put up or create a flag and alert in the system. So there's a whole lot of things that we're doing that with the base information and data that we have, that you're able to monitor against and kind of set actionable alerts to respond to and react to. So that's something that we've got coming here really soon. But overall, right now, today, you can put any expiration date on any system and then be able to track that through.
Cool. So we probably have time for one more question. What's your top tip takeaway from today's session? If you haven't done really any documentation organization, what's the
Yep.
first thing you would tell people to do?
Honestly, just start, right? It doesn't matter what solution you're using. It doesn't matter how you want to structure. It's just start. Start capturing that knowledge, and start working towards gaining that 30%. 25 to 30% capacity back in your team. Start so that you're working yourself towards a point where if somebody does leave your organization, you aren't left stranded with countless unbillable hours trying to discover and understand things when your clients have a pressing issue.
Yeah, that's the
It's all
worst.
about just starting, right? We can have a strategy, we can have a vision, we can have a mission. None of that matters if we don't execute. And that's true with everything in your business and almost anything in your life. But just start. That's the best thing I can do. It starts with taking the first step and starting to document things, starting to tie things together, and being consistent in how you do that across your clients.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. I mean, if you just look at the poll that we took earlier, if you're spending 10 to 20% of your time searching for things, that's almost, that could be up to a full day of billable hours that people are spending looking for things. And, talk about a way to, to get more hours in the day. That's an easy one. So anyway, we are at time. So thank you everybody for attending today. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. And if you want to know more, just get a hold of us, type demo, we'll follow up with you. And thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.